Hi, Facebook live streamers. Thank you for being with me today on Change It Up with Paula Shaw. You're backstage now on the day that we're recording the show, so you're here with us, seeing all the ins and outs of how we go about doing it. And I think it's going to be a wonderful show today, so stick around. It's called Healing the Wounds of War, and my special guest today is my dad, Jack Gutman, who is one of the last surviving veterans of the Normandy invasion on D-Day. So he'll have a lot of fascinating stories to tell that you're not going to hear just anywhere. So stay with us. We're going to talk about healing the wounds of war, and that will include a lot of discussion about PTSD and what can be done about it. So in just a moment, we're going to begin. Can you hit that button for me, Dad? He's on the side. You'll meet him shortly. Welcome to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. This is a show for men and women just like you and me who are tired of being stuck in a rut, who are ready to change it up. I mean, one of the few things we can count on in life is that change is going to happen. It's a constant, whether you're ready for it or not. So on this show, we're wanting to bring you information and ideas to help you embrace that change better and be happy about it, because if it's coming, we might as well enjoy it. So let's do it together. Today, our show is called Healing the Wounds of War. Memorial Day is just about upon us, and as most of you know, of course, that's a day of remembrance of people who have died in battle for their country. And so we are going to be looking at that very thing in just a moment. But my special guest today is my dad, Jack Gutman, who is not only the author of this book, Healing the Wounds of War, he is also one of the last surviving veterans of the Normandy invasion, D-Day, as we all know it. So I thought, since Memorial Day is coming and we're all about honoring our military, it would be a great time to have Dad come on and talk to us not only about D-Day, but about his battle with PTSD for 66 years and what he ended up doing about it. So before we bring Dad on, I'd like to give you a few facts about Memorial Day that I bet you didn't know. So first of all, did you know that we are all supposed to be silent for a moment of remembrance at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day, which this year I believe is Wednesday, the 30th. So yes, we're supposed to take a moment of silence to honor those who have fallen in battle on Memorial Day. Secondly, while it didn't become a federal holiday until 1971, the roots of Memorial Day are ancient. Ancient Greeks and Romans held annual holidays of remembrance for loved ones who had fallen in battle. As early as 431 BC, Athenian general and statesman Pericles delivered a funeral oration praising the sacrifice and valor of those who had been killed in the Peloponnesian War, a speech that actually some have compared to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address in tone. The purpose of Memorial Day initially was to honor those fallen in the Civil War. That's when the whole idea began. And one of the earliest commemorations was organized by a group of recently freed slaves. What happened was, as the war was nearing its end, thousands of Union soldiers held as prisoners were herded into a series of hastily assembled camps. And they weren't wonderful for the most part. And one was a former racetrack near South Carolina's city's Citadel. And it was so bad that over 250 of the prisoners died from disease and exposure and were buried in a mass grave behind the track's grandstand. 3 weeks after the Confederate surrender, an unusual procession entered the former camp. On May 1st, 1865, more than 1,000 recently freed slaves, accompanied by regiments of the U.S. colored troops, including the Massachusetts 54th Infantry, and a handful of white Charlestonians gathered in the camp to consecrate a new, proper burial site for the Union dead. The group sang hymns, gave readings, and distributed flowers around the cemetery, which they dedicated to the martyrs of the racecourse, as they called them. I don't know about you, but I think that's a movie script right there. That would be one I would definitely want to see. So we have a long history of all that has contributed to Memorial Day. But what we also want to focus on today is what happens to those who don't fall in battle. What happens to the survivors? Too often, they develop PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So what does that look like? How do you know if you have it? Because by the way, PTSD is not, what's the word I want? It is not only developed, or the only people who get it are not necessarily just military. Anyone who experiences a significant traumatic event can develop PTSD. So what it looks like, it could be that you feel on edge. Nightmares keep coming back. Sudden noises make you jump. Maybe you're isolating more and more. If you've experienced any kind of severe trauma or life-threatening event, you could be at risk for developing PTSD, and it doesn't always show up right away. Sometimes we don't see it for months at a time after the event has occurred. But anyone who's experienced these kinds of events can have them. So here are some of the symptoms that you might want to look for just to see if you are someone who is suffering from this disorder. Nightmares, sleeplessness, loss of interest, kind of apathy about life, numbness, like just numbness about how you feel about things, about life, a sense of emptiness. Could be anger or irritability, or a feeling that you constantly have to be on guard. So there are many manifestations. Of course, we've all heard about hallucinations that people have, and severe anxiety and depression. These are all components of post-traumatic stress disorder. Because when people go through terrifying events or something that felt threatening either to their life or the lives of someone they loved or a group of people they loved, this can come back, the fear, the panic, all that went on in that moment can come back and develop these different symptoms that we're talking about. 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some kind of traumatic event at least once in their lives. And this equates to 223.4 million people. Up to 20% of those people will develop PTSD. That equates to 44.7 million people who are struggling today with PTSD. An estimated 8% of Americans, that's 24.4 million people, have PTSD at any given time. This is a huge issue. It's a huge problem. And so many people out there either don't know they have it or have no idea what to do about it. Sometimes they're steeped in shame. Sometimes they're worried that something's wrong with them. They may not even relate it to a traumatic event that happened. And sometimes, especially men, have that feeling of, well, I'm a guy, I can get past this, I'm not going to let this get me down. And then too often what ends up happening is people try methods of self-medicating. They drink too much, they use drugs, or they'll get into some other kind of addictive habit. Addiction is often the result of people trying to deal with the pain of their PTSD. In the past year alone, the number of diagnosed cases in the military jumped 50%. And that's only the reported and diagnosed cases. There are many, many people who haven't reported their PTSD. And 17% of combat troops are women. I didn't even realize that. And 71% of female military personnel develop PTSD due to sexual assault within the ranks. Sexual assault that happens to them while they're trying to do their duty and serve their countries. There are many, many different types of treatments for PTSD today. And some of the ones I love the most are those that come from the field of energy psychology, of which I am a founding member. Some of you may have heard of meridian tapping or EFT. And in that practice, we focus on the thing that's negative or scary or that's hurting us, causing us pain, and we tap different meridian points. And there is a video on my YouTube channel, Paula Shaw Counseling, showing me demonstrating EFT. There are various points that we always use, and we just focus on the negative thing and tap the points. And what they found in a study at Harvard is that what ends up happening is we are sending calming signals to the amygdala, that part of our brain that prepares us for fight, flight, or freeze. There are many other things that people can do that help with PTSD. Certainly nutrition is important and exercise is important. And I highly recommend a video on YouTube called EFT and War Veterans. That's EFT and War Veterans. And also on my YouTube channel, there are other processes you can do, breath processes and other things that can help you to calm yourself if you're going through anxiety or upset because some sort of a PTSD reaction has come upon you. The unpredictability is also a big part of the problem. That's why people tend to fall into isolation and other kinds of behaviors that don't serve them well. Most important thing, you want to seek help. You need a professional. And we'll be hearing a lot more about that from my dad, one of the last living veterans of the Invasion of Normandy, who will be with us in just a moment after this break. We'll be right back. All right. Yeah, oh, yeah. And then when we get ready to go again, I'll have you hit that green button again. But let's roll you into the picture. So, Mom, can you do me a favor? My mother's in the background here. Can you look at that camera and see if you see Dad okay when he comes in here and if his mic is not in front of his face? Yeah. I think you need a director's hat and a little monocle. Okay. So let's have the mic there and twist it.
Okay. Way. How's that?
Is that better? All right. Good.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So I'll move over a little bit here.
Okay.
The director's giving instructions. That's good, Mom. Or you can just do like this, and then he'll know that means talk loud.
Okay.
Oh, all right. I'm going to do your bio first when we come back. So let me get that. Here we go. And of course, on the first thing I forgot. Okay, you're going to hit that.
Green button?
Hit the green button. And welcome back to Change It Up with Paula Shaw. We are talking about the wounds of war today. But first, I want to tell you that we are being brought to you today by Sherry Blair, your financial consultant, empowering women to grow beautiful financial futures. Sherry can be reached at 619-997-0416. That's 619-997-0416. Or at sherryblair.com, spelled CHERIBLAIR.com. And now, as promised in this segment, we are going to be talking with my dad, Jack Gutman, who is one of the last surviving veterans of the Invasion of Normandy on D-Day. He was born in San Francisco in 1925 and grew up in a tough neighborhood of New York where survival meant belonging to a gang. At 17 years of age, 17 years of age, think about your 17-year-old, he wanted so desperately to serve his country that he convinced his father to sign papers for him so he could go into the military service early. He enlisted in the Navy, and after training for months as a medical corpsman, his first active duty took him to England to prepare a hospital for the aftermath of the invasion of Europe, otherwise known as D-Day. On D-Day, he landed between Utah and Omaha beaches in the Invasion of Normandy, having the very difficult task of caring for those killed and wounded during the attack. He was a corpsman, and he will be telling you more about that, a medical corpsman. He later served the same function in the invasion of Okinawa, which is pretty rare. Very few men served in both theaters. And after all of that, when released from the Navy in active duty, he spent the next 66 years dealing with the PTSD that you can imagine must have been huge after, at 17 and a half years old, having to deal with the horror of the invasion. But he got help. He's on the other side of it all now. He's written this amazing book, One Veteran's Journey to Heal the Wounds of War, and today spends every chance he can get speaking wherever he can and really trying to put out the call to people to get help, because it can completely change your life. So, without any further ado, hi, Dad.
How are you? Thanks for inviting me here.
I'm so glad you're here. I think it's so appropriate with Memorial Day being so close. So, Dad, there are so few people really still alive who can describe what that day was like. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about, set the scene, what was it like?
Okay. Actually, at 17 and a half, I always tell people when I speak at different groups, what were you doing when you were 17? Mm-hmm. Many of them were going to parties, on the beach, hanging out with their best friends.
Right.
At 17...
The stuff you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly right. At 17 and a half, it's a very bad, misty day. The water is very, very rough. I am now heading to a beach I didn't even know anything about, except we found out then this is France, Normandy Beach.
And what kind of a ship were you on? What brought you there?
It was I believe it was like an AP, it was a troop ship. I know that.
See. Uh-huh.
And I was with a whole bunch of troops. And the night before, they fed the guys well, which turned out to be a very bad thing.
They fed them well, and that was a bad thing?
Well, because of the fact they knew we were going into an invasion. Guys were kidding around. Some were sober. But what happened is that they ate things they gave them, like pies or whatever they want. And unfortunately, the next day, with the rough seas, very, very rough seas,
I see.
They got seasick. Many of them. I mean, it was a horrible thing. As the scene that the Germans saw, that the Germans had set up, and what the Germans saw from their point of view, they saw 5,000 ships, 5,000 ships of different varieties. They saw 4,300 landing craft circling around and coming in.
Wow.
There was 11,000 planes that took part at that big invasion. Mm-hmm. And all of the ships with the cannons and so forth, and 135 to 150,000 men, English, Canadian, and American, coming into 5 beaches there, which was Omaha, Utah, Sword, Gold, and Juneau. What We didn't know when the cannons were, the mortars were coming from the ships and hitting the beaches. We thought nothing would be alive. Well, we did not know.
Now, wait, you're saying before the troops were going to go on the beaches, they were being bombed by the boats.
Oh, yes. Now,
Okay.
the ships, the big, military ships, destroyers and so forth, they're all shooting onto the beach.
Okay.
When you saw that, you figured it was a cakewalk. Because
Right.
when we had other invasions or practice invasions, it turned out that nothing would be alive after that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did not know, Rommel, who set up this whole thing,
Who was a German general.
German general,
Mhm.
very shrewd German general, turned out where he set up 30,000 mines on the beaches,
Oh.
on the various posts that were out in the water, wooden ones and metal ones. They put mines on it, and if a ship hit it or a guy touched it, it exploded. And
So
this
just so
was-
I'm clear, the posts you're talking about in this,
and then continue. And that's what everyone was thinking.
right?
But with the barbed wire on the beach and the 30,000 mines all over, if you saw the picture Saving Private Ryan, that would give you an idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I tell so many people when I speak at various places, you take that picture and see that what happened and double it. It was that bad because you didn't see what happened to when the explosions happened to the men.
Of course.
There was,
So
unfortunately,
let me understand something, Daddy. The bunker, the Germans had also created these bunkers that were shooting at the beach as you all landed, right?
right. I was just going to come to that because beside the mines, they had these huge bunkers up on that. They were made of steel and concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when of the 11,000 planes they had, there was a certain amount of bombers that were going to go over and drop many, many, many bombs. I mean, thousands of
On
bombs
those bunkers.
on those bunkers.
Uh-huh.
Now, with that, if they hit the bunkers, they would render a lot of them useless.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened as they were going over, a cloud covered the bunkers between them and the bunkers.
Uh-huh. So
And
they couldn't see.
No, and they said, we can't see the bunkers. And they said, when you think you're near the beach, count to 3 and drop the bombs. So you had to be careful because this was all before the troops would come.
Right.
They counted to 3, and exactly over a mile away, all the bombs went over the bunkers, did not hit one bunker at all. Some shells hit the bunkers from the ships, but didn't cause that much damage.
So if
But-
I'm understanding this correctly, you've got these big German guns that were shooting a lot of bullets fast, right? And they are now, nothing is stopping them from shooting you guys as you're landing
Right.
on the beach.
See, that's right. So since the ships, the airplanes missed the bunkers, they were all intact, the bunkers, and they had a couple of machine guns that could shoot off hundreds and hundreds of bullets a minute. And as
So you were sitting ducks.
the landing craft did not know this. They thought it all had been taken care of. So they felt very secure when they were coming off. So all the waves, they could call them waves, first wave, second wave, and so forth. All these people come in first, and they land. As soon as they were come down and the ramps came down, the German machine gunners were just picking them off and killing them like crazy.
Oh.
They panicked, and what happened, they were jumping over the side of the ship. And unfortunately, because the ships couldn't come in because of those barriers that they had in the water and all the barriers, they had to wade in. Even myself, when I came in about 14th wave or 16th wave, because we were not to be fighting, we were to come and patch up the wounded.
Right.
And when we came in, and what happened to those first wave people, there was almost one battalion I don't know which one it was, that whether it was the 29th or whatever it was, one battalion got total, 90% was wiped out
Oh, my goodness.
before they even got a shot off.
And let's talk a little bit more about that when we come back from the break, because I think people don't realize how dangerous it was because of those guns. You guys were basically sitting ducks. So we will be back to Normandy in just a moment. Okay, whoops. Hit the red button down.
This one?
Yeah. And I mean the white one, I'm sorry, and then the red one. And that holds it until we're ready to start again. Okay, good.
I see. Okay.
All right, good. So in this segment, so let me bring it back, and then we'll go to, I want to talk to you about, like, what was your job? What did you do?
Right, okay.
And then,
that would be perfect. Yeah.
okay, and then because then the last segment, and I want to get into PTSD in this segment.
Right.
Because we
Okay,
only have
well
half
then,
of the last one.
we'll have to just, then quickly, I'll mention quickly what happened there. Back to the hospital quickly, leave there, and then Okinawa, which was another worse one, because we lost 14,000 men.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about Okinawa kind of briefly.
Yeah,
and then
that's
we'll
what I
just-
mean. Yeah,
yeah.
I will do that.
Okay.
So,
Because we wanna
because
hit-
after Okinawa, I want to just say, after I got discharged, then we can go into post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
But no, I'm going to be mentioning all of these things went into my head when I'm talking about this next segment.
Okay.
All the things I saw.
All right. And yes, and every once in a while you might just glance at the clock so you have an idea of where we are.
What now?
Every once in a while you might just look at the clock,
Oh, okay.
so then you'll have a better idea of how much time you have left.
Okay. You want me, let me see here.
Yeah, let's wet all our whistles. Are we doing okay, CB? My mother, I told you, is sitting behind the camera directing. All right, ready? Wait a minute, let me get Sherry's info up here. Okay. And welcome back to Change It Up with Paula Shaw, being brought to you by Sherry Blair, your financial consultant, whose whole purpose and passion is empowering women to grow beautiful financial futures. She can be reached at 619-997-0416. That's 619-997-0416, or at sherryblair.com, spelled CHERIBLAIR.com. We're back with my dad, Jack Gutman, author of One Veteran's Journey to Heal the Wounds of War, and also one of the last surviving veterans of the invasion of Normandy on D-Day. So we have been talking about what it was actually like on D-Day and how the U.S., well, the whole Allied forces, I believe they were called, didn't expect bad weather, cloud cover kept the planes from being able to shoot and take out of commission the German giant guns that were just slaughtering people on the beach. They were like sitting ducks as they landed because of those big guns. And my dad's job was, you were called a medical corpsman, right,
Yeah,
Dad?
corpsman, yes.
So your job was to do exactly what?
My job was we were attached to a hospital from England, like you had mentioned, and our job was we were going to come in on a late wave just to take care of the wounded, to patch up any men that need medical assistance. We would do that, and then we would evacuate them, and we would be approximately just so many hours. They didn't know at that time. It turned out I was on the beach for about 6 to 7 hours. When I came in, and we had to wade in water up to our chests.
Because of the barbed wire and all that. You were
Yeah,
studying.
well, they got the barbed wire on the beach, but
Right.
the metal posts and so forth. When we came in, what we found, there was bodies that were floating on the road, a lot of dead people, though. Now, I want you to think about something. Here I am, 17 and a half, and all this is going into my head. I had been trained for a lot of things, but I did not expect this. And when you see all those bodies laying around and body parts and things like this, it does something to you. The same thing happened in Okinawa when you see all of these with the kamikazes and everything else, which we'll say later. But on the beach, there was men screaming, "Mama, mama, mama," and then they're pleading with you, "Doc, am I going to die? Am I going?" And you know certain people, because of the wounds, will die, and you have to lie to them,
right? Try to
and tell them
hope.
you're going to make it. Yes, to give them hope.
Yes.
And a lot of this all stayed in a 17-and-a-half-year-old mind.
I can't imagine.
Think of your kids doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're trying to comfort them. You're trying to give them hope that they're going to make it, and you know they're dying, right?
And then you do certain things to them to try to patch them up and all, and then you see the man die, and you don't know whether it was something you did, so that you carry with you.
Of course.
And that's the way it was. So anyway, I wound up with all of the things going. There were so many mistakes that were on the beach because we couldn't get the tanks, because they had tanks. Tanks normally got on the beach and got rid of a lot of the barbed wire mines and all the stuff. The underwater demolition crew came in much earlier and disabled a lot of the mines. Those were called frogmen at that time.
Right, now, and they actually are the predecessors of today's Navy SEALs.
That's
right?
exactly right,
Yes.
yeah. And God bless them. They were great men. And so all of this was done, but the tanks that were on pads. They made special pads for them to float because of the barriers and everything. Mm-hmm. But the water was so rough, it flipped the tanks right into the water.
Oh, my God.
Tanks and the men drowned right there.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many people just drowned on that thing. It was a horrible, horrible thing.
You know, one of the things that I remember realizing when I visited the museum, the World War II Museum in New Orleans, where your story is actually archived on video now.
Yes, it is.
But one of the things I remember was the weight that must have been on Eisenhower, because he had to call when to do it. And they couldn't wait too long because they were afraid the Germans would find out about the invasion, right? There was all these reasons to try and keep it secret. But oh my God, the weight that must have been on him. And as it was, he actually had to choose a day that was terrible weather. Right.
It was going to be on the 5th of June, but the weather was so bad, and then he decided with the generals, and then it was a split deal. He finally made the decision. What a decision, for all that, because of all the men and what was to happen. But they made this. Anyway, that whole thing was, it was almost like a disaster, and it was just sheer force that came in and took care of that.
So let me just ask you a question, and then I want to talk about your PTSD. It looks from the picture we're painting right now that there's no way that the Allied forces can be victorious. What saved the day?
It was actually the combination, and it's interesting because I just want to bring this up now because I don't know if we'll have much time later, but the thing is this. When I was telling the story and they were taping me at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and I finished and I was telling them about what happened and about all the tragedies that happened and so forth.
Yes.
And then what I had to do and whatever, the whole thing. The guy said to me, he said, Mr. Gutman, you're a hero. And I said, no, I'm not a hero. The man, like General Eisenhower, the admirals, and all the people that participated in that Normandy invasion, and the men who brought the food, the men who hit the beaches and died, we lost 9,000 men that day. We lost 9,000, maybe more. And I said, those are the heroes. And I says, and the main thing that we won the war, the Normandy invasion, is because we became a team. And the team were the heroes. And we will always, as long as we stay a team, we will be heroes. And we will, and we'll be successful. I tell this even when I talk to classes, that if you stop being the individual you know, and work more as a team, you will find yourself more successful.
That's true.
And that's exactly what happened there. That is why we won that.
Because we just
Fantastic.
kept coming as a team.
Absolutely.
Right. And in spite of winning that day, there was a lot of loss, right? As you said, 9,000 men died.
Right.
But how many men were psychologically damaged, you know, in a huge way, you being one of them?
Right.
So how did that manifest? I mean, how much longer were you in the military after that day?
Well, from there, I mean, I had to leave, and then I came back. Then I went down. I was sent to. I didn't think I'd be in any more invasions, and it actually turned out. I turned out to be. I was sent to California, trained with the Marines, and also I was in the Beach Battalion, and we wound up going to Okinawa with huge things. Made the invasion of Okinawa, and that picture, Hacksaw Ridge. I wasn't there at Hacksaw Ridge, but I was on the beach there taking care of the wounded, but I did not know about Hacksaw Ridge.
So
but
now
that affected me greatly to see 14,000 men die at Okinawa.
So that's worse than Normandy.
It was
I
worse.
don't know if people realize.
Plus the
there was more loss
kamikaze
there.
planes hitting the ships. I never saw a man kill himself. I saw that happen when it hit the battleship New Mexico. All these things stayed in my head.
And you're not even
Caused
20
me problems.
yet, right?
I was 18 then.
Oh my God! So 18. So
18.
By 18, you've seen these horrifying things that people could live 20 lifetimes and never see.
Right.
And so what happened when you got out of the military? I assume they released you after Okinawa.
Yeah. Well,
And then
after Okinawa, we were on our way to invade Japan, and thank God they dropped the bombs because we occupied Sasebo, Japan. No fighting because that was it, and they were waving, which I said, thank God for that.
No, that was the
But anyway,
dropping of the atom bomb, right?
all these times from Normandy to Okinawa and all, I was having these flashbacks. And we called it was just like, we didn't have the word post-traumatic stress disorder. Right. I did not know what it was. I was doing crazy things. I was having these flashbacks. And I remember you asked me once.
Battle fatigue? They used to call it battle fatigue?
We called it battle fatigue.
Yeah.
And they said you have to live with it.
Right.
And so, but the thing, I figured I would get over it even after I was discharged. I did not. I kept having these flashbacks. My flashbacks, each person has a different type of flashback because I've talked to many men and they're always different. But mine turned out, I kept seeing the invasions over and over again on my flashbacks. And I see the men screaming, and everything is magnified. And it makes it worse. And then you start doing crazy things to yourself. I was doing, financially, I was doing stupid things. I was telling people, bosses off. I was doing the most, I almost lost my dear wife and everything. And I had a family with you and the kids.
And you were doing some self-medicating with alcohol.
Drinking
right?
pretty heavy, very heavy.
All right, when we come back from the break, let's pick it up right there and talk about what happened. How did you get out of that mess?
Okay.
All right, we'll be right back. All right. I'm ready to just keep rolling if you are. Oh, let us not forget to tell them how to find your book.
Oh, Amazon.com.
Yeah, and I know it rang. Let me see if... No. Well, I'm just going to pray it doesn't ring again because I'll have to take it off the tripod to put it on silent. These are the problems, folks, you know. The phone rang. I don't know if you heard that, but we're going to keep going. Oh. That's okay. It wouldn't stop it. Can you still see us? Are we still streaming? Okay. All right, then. Shall we go?
Okay.
Okay, so book. And do you have a website, Dad?
I'm on, yes, if you hit
if
my
anybody
name.
wants to reach you, what do they? If anybody, whoop, you want to come in, Sherry? Our sponsor, Sherry Blair, just walked into.
Hi, Shelly.
We're still streaming. We're just got one segment left, so if you want to just come in, That's my mom, Joe. My dad, Jack.
Nice to see you. I've watched you when you were on Facebook, and then heard you on the radio, and I see you're twice as pretty.
Oh, bless you, Cameron. Thank you. All right. So yeah, we're on our last segment, and then we'll be. Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. Fabulous. Is your phone off, Sherry? Okay. All right. So, how did they reach you?
It's on Amazon.com.
What if somebody wanted to reach you to speak or something?
Yeah, JoeJack777G at AOL.com.
Joe Jack. JAC.
Yeah.
JOJAC.
Yeah, 777G at AOL.
This is almost as complicated as Sherry's was. AOL.com. Okay.
Or they can use my phone number, 714-5.
Oh,
call me definitely, 714-525-4954.
I think let's just give them that. That's easier. 4954. Okay, got it. All right. Here we go. Hit the green button.
Down the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And welcome back to Change It Up with Paula Shaw. We're being brought to you by Sherry Blair, your financial consultant whose passion is empowering women to grow beautiful financial futures. She can be reached at 619-997-0416 or at sherryblair.com, spelled CHERIBLAIR.com. All right, we're here talking with my dad today, Jack Gutman, one of the last surviving veterans from the Invasion of Normandy. And if you've been listening, Dad has talked a lot about what it was like that day on D-Day, and then the second invasion he was part of at Okinawa, all of which happened to him by the age of 18. So talk about a setup for PTSD. All of that when you're not even old enough to drink. So think about what that did to his psyche. And so he was just explaining to us that one of the things he suffered from was severe nightmares and flashbacks. Right, Dad?
That's right. Like I had said, the flashbacks became more and more constant. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wondered about it. And I figured, well, I'll probably get over it. But
did you tell anybody what was going
no,
on?
what happened is this. Even when I got ready to be discharged, because I had a lot of points, and they just let me go because I had 33 points being overseas and in action all the time. That and if you had 31 points, the war was over. They discharged me.
Oh.
So even at home and all that, when they said to me, when they gave me my papers, have you ever been wounded? I said, well, outside of losing my hearing my hearing at Okinawa on that thing.
Because of the
kamikaze
noises,
planes
the
attacked, that was really bad. I said, I didn't tell them because I figured if I tell people what's happening to me, they would put me in the mental institution. And while I was a medic and training and all that stuff, I had to spend 2 weeks in a mental institution taking care of those patients. And it scared the heck out of me. And I figured if I tell them what's happening to me, I had no idea what it was.
Sure.
So I never told anyone about, if people said to me, were you in the war? I'd say, yeah, I was in the war. I don't want to talk about it. And instead of going into a depression, and so I would not have all these flashbacks, because they were really happening more and more. I took on things to exceed, and I went into show business. And I became a stand-up comedian. And at that time here, and I met my wife in night school. I wanted to become a doctor. And so I was using things to keep my mind busy. And the flashbacks, my wife and I, it's another story in itself, so I can't go in that. But as far as but she's been an asset to me. We've been married, coming up June, 71 years.
Wow.
Together.
Wow, 71,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
And I almost lost her due to these post-traumatic stress.
Well, as you mentioned, you were drinking too much.
Yeah, I started
and
drinking.
Obviously, you were kind of a workaholic.
Workaholic, exactly.
Keeping yourself busy, busy.
I remember in show business, I did 3 shows a night, and I wished I could have done 5, because when she wasn't with me, if I was asleep, the nightmares become the flashbacks. And so I just constantly kept myself busy. And then finally, one time, after almost 66 years, and I did things that were so crazy, especially with money and things like that. I went broke because of doing stupid things. I said crazy things to people. People that going through post-traumatic stress. I even put in my book here, I said, and I've given a lot to people. And like you said in your introduction, you don't have to have post-traumatic stress and be a veteran. There are a lot of women that have gotten the books. I've gone through a lot of things, and men that were not in the war. I've read the book, and they said, "You sure changed my life." And I was grateful for that.
And how do people get that book, Dad?
Well, it's on Amazon.com, or they can contact me at Jojack, JOJAC 777G at AOL.com.
And you have a phone number, too, which is
714-525-4954.
So I would like to tell a little personal story here, because I think one of the turning points for you began actually when I was starting a grief group, and I was kind of new in my practice at the time, and I would have like a community meeting, and you and Mom came just to support me and listen to the talk that I was doing. And I remember at the end you said, "We're signing up." And I was like, "What? You were just supposed to be here listening." "No, we're signing up." And you and Mom came and did that group.
Right.
And isn't that the first time you realized that you had been grieving all these years
I'm
over?
glad you brought that up, because I did put in my book. But, you know, it's interesting, when I was talking about, I talk about the veteran, in the Veterans Administration, when they finally got my treatment. I went through 3.5 years. But with you, before I went into that treatment, after 66 years, I remember you were the first one, because what happened to me, and I say this humbly and with a lot of humility, is that I was having Thanksgiving dinner with all my family, and I was drinking a lot. If I was invited to your house, I did not bring 1 bottle of wine. I brought a gallon of wine or a magnum of champagne, so I would not run out. And I'm drinking and drinking, playing with the kids and everything like that. And then while we sat for Thanksgiving dinner, and all my family is sitting there, my face went into the plate. And it was the most embarrassing thing I ever went through.
But it changed your life for the better, right?
And that's when you got me, and it changed my life. As a matter of fact, you stopped me with your treatment that you grief program, and I'm grateful to you. And I tell people wherever I speak, and I'm glad I can say it here on the radio, is the fact you were the greatest help to me, because you stopped me from drinking. I didn't drink for 15 months. You know,
right.
And I
stopped.
and I know my wife was so happy about that too.
But I think what people don't get, Dad, is that underneath all those symptoms of PTSD is grief. You were shown some horrific things. You experienced some horrific things at 17 and 18 years of age, and nobody helped you grieve it. You didn't even know you were grieving it.
Absolutely.
And that's what I really want people to get.
Right.
The depression, the anxiety, the sleeplessness, the flashbacks, they're all manifestations really of the grief, of of what you experienced in the trauma.
True. Well, I went even after that, and then finally, because I was not going to go for any treatment to the veterans.
Right.
But since you had cleared me on that thing, I was sober now. and I was thinking a little bit more rationally.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, when I was at the veterans, and they said, "Have you ever really been wounded?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you something." And I told them exactly what I told you about.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "If you try to report me, I'm going to deny everything." And I told him what I had, and he said to me, "You have post-traumatic stress disorder." And I said, "What the heck is that?" And he told me, and he sent me, I had a psychiatrist first and then the therapist. And when the therapist, on the first day I went through it, he took me back to Normandy. It was so traumatic. I just wound up crying. And then he said to me, "Jack, these are like big ice cubes that are going to melt. We'll melt them down so someday you'll be able to talk about it." Now, I've gone 66 years, and of course, outside of the you stopped me up from the alcohol thing, all of a sudden, I got to the point, and when he said, "I'll see you next week," I said to myself, "The heck you are. I'm not going to come back. I don't want to go through this again." But I realized I can't keep doing this to myself. And so
And you couldn't keep
3.5 years later, I was able to talk about it. Then I wrote the book because he encouraged me, and you were the one, the two, that encouraged me. So beside my kids, everyone wanted me to write the book, but you're the one that got me to put in things about what was my post-traumatic stress. Remember how I fought you on it?
Yeah.
And I said, "Paula, I don't want to talk about it, you know."
And you know what, Dad, since we're getting close to the end of our time, I wanted to just say a couple things. You worked 3.5 years, and thank goodness it really helped you. You were doing a more traditional kind of therapy. That's why I also want to encourage our listeners to check out the energy psychology methods that are being used now, like meridian tapping that I talked about in the beginning, because they're moving people so much faster. In that video I mentioned, which you've now seen,
Right.
EFT and war veterans, in 6 weeks, amazing transformation happened for people.
You know what? I heard you mention that, and I said to myself, I wish I would have known that then. I would not have to go through 3.5 years.
Exactly. And yet, you're on the other side, thank goodness. You're doing all this beautiful work now, speaking, writing this beautiful book, One Veteran's Journey to Heal the Wounds of War. And I just want to thank you, Dad, for being here today, sharing your story.
Well, I thank you,
love
and you. And I encourage veterans and people who are going through this post-traumatic stress, women, men, whatever it is, whether you were in the war or not, get help. I guarantee you, I never dreamed I could ever be on this side of it because I was so desperate and in such a terrible shape. So thank you, thank you.
And thank you. And thank you all for joining us. You can hear us here on AM 1170 The Answer on Saturday and Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock in San Diego. Also on all major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Libsyn, Omni, and SoundCloud, on radio stations all across the country, iHeart, and Blog Talk. And if you can't remember all of that, just ask Alexa. And please also go to our Change It Up Radio Facebook page, like us, join the Change It Up Radio group, and check us out on Instagram. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. All right. Oh, there's a little button that says finish. Bye, Facebook people. Thank you for being with us.